How in the hell does something like this happen in the United States of America? Baltimore County Police have now confirmed the arrest of 4 juveniles in the assault and carjacking of a 69-year-old man in Overlead last week. The whole mess started around 10:30 a.m. on January 3, in the area of the 4200 block of Cardwell Avenue, where police say 6 assailants violently attacked the victim, punching and kicking him until he fell to the ground. When the police arrived, the elderly victim told them he was in the process of getting something out of his car's trunk when 2 vehicles sped past him. The vehicles then turned around and drove towards him. 6 males got out of the vehicles and threatened to shoot him before they took his wallet and keys to his Buick LeSabre. One of the suspects then got into the victim's car and proceeded to place it in reverse, driving over the man's right arm and hand and then driving off with the victim's car. The other teens then returned to the respective vehicles they arrived in and drove off. Luckily, his Xfinity Comcast employee who was working in the area at the time overheard the chaos and saw the suspects get into their cars. He then proceeded to call 911 and followed them to the area of Sturbridge Drive and Pickering Drive in Baltimore. Multiple officers responded to the area, along with the aviation unit, until the suspects were all arrested. Officers later recovered the victim's car along with 2 other stolen cars, a dark green 2001 Chevrolet Suburban and a red 2007 Saturn VU, and arrested 4 teens. NPR reports, Baltimore residents blame record high murder rate on lower police presence. For the 3rd year in a row, Baltimore, MD, has had more than 300 murders, reaching a new record of murders per number of residents in 2017. Some residents attribute the high murder rate to relaxed police patrols in the city following high-profile cases of police brutality. Officers have backed off in neighborhoods, like the one where Freddie Gray was arrested. The Reverend Kenji Scott, a pastor in Baltimore who's held positions in local city government, says the opposite needs to happen. "We wanted the police there," Scott says. "We wanted them engaged in the community. We didn't want them beating the hell out of us. We didn't want that." He's among activists who are calling for police reform to reduce the violence in Baltimore and several other high-crime cities across the U.S. that he says haven't seen change. That change begins with the conversation between the communities directly involved, Scott says. "We need the front-line police officers and we need the heart of the black community to step to the forefront of this discussion," he says. "And that's when we're going to see a decrease in crime." This interview has been edited for length and clarity. On the current state of community safety in Baltimore, when you think about young people who are out here facing these economic challenges and are homeless and living places that are uncertain, and you're a parent, you're scared. Not just for yourself really, but for your children. The average age of a homicidal victim in Baltimore City right now is 31 years old. We had a young man who attended one of the prime high schools, Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, Jonathan Tabash, and he was 19 years old. He was a Morgan State student. And he was killed on his way to the store. That's the state of Baltimore right now. On whether the community wanted police to back off after the death of Freddie Gray, no. That represented our progressives, our activists, our liberal journalists, our politicians, but it did not represent the overall community. Because we know for a fact that around the time Freddie Gray was killed, we start to see homicides increase. We had 5 homicides in that neighborhood while we were protesting. What I wanted to see happen was that people would be able to trust the relationship with our police department so that they would feel more comfortable. We'd have conversations with the police about crime in their neighborhood because they would feel safer. So we wanted the police there. We wanted them engaged in the community. We didn't want them beating the hell out of us, we didn't want that. On whether the high murder rate is unique to Baltimore, it's not. I lost my brother in St. Louis in 2004, just lost my cousin in Chicago. No, it's not unique, and that's the horrible thing. On whether Ferguson, the killing of Michael Brown, and the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement has brought change, The primary thrust nationwide is what President Obama wanted to do, focus on building relationships with police departments and major cities where there had been a history of conflict. That hasn't happened. We don't see that. I don't know a city, Baltimore for certain, we've not seen any changes in those relationships. What we have seen is that the police has distanced themselves, and the community has distanced themselves even further. So the divide has really intensified, it hasn't decreased. And of course we want to delineate the whole culture of bad policing that exists, nobody denies that, but as a result of this, we don't see the level of policing we need in our community to keep the crime down in our cities that we are seeing bleed to death. On whether he's optimistic for 2018, I am not. Because I look at the conclusion of 2017, these same cities, St. Louis, Baltimore, New Orleans and Chicago, these same black cities are still bleeding to death and we're still burying young men in these cities. I'm a preacher, I want to be hopeful, but not as it stands, no. Not until we really have a real conversation with our frontline officers in the heart of our black communities that does not involve our people who are leaders. We need the frontline police officers and we need the heart of the black community to step to the forefront of this discussion. And that's when we're going to see a decrease in crime. One of the accused is only 15 so his identity is kept private, but the other 3 are over the age of 16. Please share in hopes someday Baltimore will stop being a hotbed for criminals.